A flight attendant, her voice dripping with disdain, looks down at a young black woman and sneers. "Honey, this is business class. Your seat must be in the back." But she's just made the biggest mistake of her career. The woman she's trying to humiliate isn't just any passenger. She's the brilliant unseen force who owns the very plane they're standing in. This isn't just a story about prejudice. It's a story of power, identity, and the day a flight attendant's world came crashing down at 30,000 feet when she tried to block the airline's biggest investor from her own seat. Imani Hayes adjusted the strap of her well-worn leather satchel, a nervous energy thrumming just beneath her calm exterior. At 28, she had orchestrated financial maneuvers that made titans of industry tremble, yet the simple act of boarding a commercial flight still felt like stepping onto a stage. She preferred the quiet hum of her office, the glow of multiple monitors, the elegant dance of numbers that built empires and saved failing ones. The world of people was messier, its algorithms unpredictable. Today's stage was Gate B42 at JFK International, the departure point for Apex Air's flagship Flight 001 to London Heathrow. The air buzzed with the controlled chaos of premium travel, the clinking of glasses from the lounge, the rustle of expensive coats, the murmur of conversations about second homes and third-quarter earnings. Imani, dressed in a simple but elegant gray cashmere hoodie, dark jeans, and a pair of impeccably clean white sneakers, stood out by not trying to. She clutched her boarding pass, the bold lettering of Seat 3A Business Class, a small private validation. This trip was a necessity, not a luxury. Her firm, Nexus Capital, had recently become the majority shareholder in Apex Air, pulling the legacy carrier from the brink of a highly publicized bankruptcy. It was a hostile, brilliant, and surgically precise acquisition she had led from the shadows. The media knew a buyout had happened, but the identity of the new kingmaker was a closely guarded secret, referred to only as a private equity savant. Imani valued her anonymity. It was her greatest asset. She was flying to London to meet the executive board for the first time, to finally put a face to the name they only knew from legal documents. "Now boarding business class passengers rows 1 through 5, a voice chirped over the PA system. Imani joined the short, orderly queue. She kept her head down, scrolling through market data on her phone, a habit that was both a shield and a genuine obsession. When her turn came, she handed her passport and boarding pass to the gate agent, who offered a professional, impersonal smile and waved her through. Stepping onto the jet bridge, the scent of filtered air and faint disinfectant hit her. It was the smell of transition, of moving between worlds. She entered the cabin of the Boeing 777 and was immediately met by a flight attendant standing sentinel at the entrance to the business class cabin. The woman was immaculate, her blonde hair pulled into a severe chignon, her uniform starched to a knife's edge, and a name tag that read Karen, pinned perfectly above the airline's wing logo. Her smile was a work of artifice, bright but without warmth. "Welcome aboard," Karen said, her eyes doing a swift, dismissive sweep of Imani's casual attire. The smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Hi, thank you," Imani replied, her voice soft. She moved to turn left into the hushed sanctuary of spacious pods that made up business class. Karen's arm shot out, not touching Imani, but creating an unmistakable barrier. "Whoa there, just a moment." Her tone had shifted, losing its practiced pleasantry and taking on a sharp, patronizing edge. "Economy seating is to the right. You'll just head down the main aisle and find your seat number." Imani blinked, momentarily taken aback. She held up her boarding pass. "I'm in 3A. Karen didn't look at the ticket. Her gaze remained fixed on Imani's face, then flickered down to her hoodie again, as if the comfortable fabric were a personal affront. "I'm sure that's what you think, honey, but this section is for our business class guests. It's a common mistake. The seat numbers can be confusing." She spoke slowly, as if to a child or someone who didn't understand English. The word honey landed like a small, sharp stone. A line of passengers was beginning to form behind Imani on the jet bridge, their impatient shuffling a new pressure point. "I'm not confused," Imani said, her voice remaining level. a testament to years of boardroom negotiations where losing her cool meant losing everything. "My seat is 3A. Could you please let me pass?" "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass," Karen said, her voice now laced with a theatrical sigh, as if dealing with this kind of confusion was the bane of her existence. It wasn't a request. It was a demand, a challenge. Imani held it out. Karen took it, her manicured fingers pinching the corner as if it were contaminated. She stared at it for a long, deliberate moment. The name, Dr. Imani Hayes, registered not at all. The seat number 3A was clearly there in black and white, but the data points didn't compute with the image she had already formed in her mind. A young black woman in a hoodie did not belong here. It was a glitch in her matrix. "This is interesting," Karen said, drawing out the word. She looked from the past to Imani and back again. Sometimes there are errors in the system. A last-minute equipment change can reset the seating assignments. "Let me just hold on to this for you." She tucked the boarding pass into her pocket with an air of finality. "Why don't you step aside here for a moment and we'll get this all sorted out. Let the other guests board." She gestured to a small galley space, an area of temporary exile, to be sorted out. The implication was clear. Imani was the problem, the anomaly that needed to be fixed. The other passengers, now filing past, were a mix of averted eyes and curious, pitying stares. Each glance was a small cut. Imani felt a familiar heat rise in her chest, the burning, frustrating sting of being misjudged, of having to prove her existence in spaces where others glided in without a second thought. She had managed multi-billion-dollar portfolios. She had outmaneuvered Wall Street legends. She had single-handedly saved this very airline. And in this moment, she was being blocked from her own seat by a woman named Karen because she didn't look the part. The irony was so bitter it almost made her laugh, but she didn't. Instead, she stood her ground, her spine straightening. The nervous energy was gone, replaced by something cold and hard as steel. The analyst in her mind took over, assessing the variables, calculating the optimal response. This was no longer about a seat. It was about a principle. And Dr. Imani Hayes never, ever backed down from a fight of principle. "I won't be stepping aside," Imani said. Her voice, though still quiet, had acquired a new resonance that cut through the cabin's ambient noise. "And I'll need my boarding pass back, please." Karen's painted smile tightened into a thin, bloodless line. The audacity! This girl, who clearly had no idea how things worked, was now challenging her authority. Karen had been with Apex Air for 15 years. She was a senior crew member, a gatekeeper of the premium experience. She prided herself on maintaining the right atmosphere in her cabin, an unspoken code of conduct and appearance that her most valued customers appreciated. This young woman, with her street clothes and defiant attitude, was disrupting that atmosphere. "Ma'am," Karen said, the word now a weapon, "you are holding up the boarding process. There are other passengers waiting. I am trying to help you. Now please move into the galley so I can do my job." The line behind Imani was indeed growing longer. A man in a tailored Brioni suit sighed audibly. A woman whispered to her husband, loud enough for Imani to hear, "What is the holdup? Can't they deal with these things before they get on the plane?" The humiliation was a physical sensation now, a hot flush crawling up Imani's neck. Every eye in the vicinity felt like a judgment. She was being positioned as the problem, the source of the delay, the unruly passenger. It was a classic textbook maneuver of misdirection, and she recognized it instantly. "My job is in London," Imani countered, her gaze unwavering. "And I can't get there unless you allow me to get to my seat, which is 3A. The boarding pass you have in your pocket confirms that. There is no error. Please return it to me." A man directly behind Imani, a portly, well-meaning gentleman in his 60s with a kind face, decided to intervene. "Excuse me, miss," he said to Karen. "Perhaps there's a simple misunderstanding. I'm sure we can all be reasonable." He then turned to Imani. "Young lady, maybe if you just wait, she can verify it on her little computer thingamajig." Imani offered him a tight, appreciative smile. "Thank you, sir, but there's nothing to verify. I'm assigned to seat 3A. She wouldn't be placated or managed. This was not a negotiation. Karen saw her opening. The well-meaning man had unknowingly reinforced her narrative that Imani was being unreasonable. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," she said, recognizing the frequent flyer. "I'm trying to be reasonable. But some people," she added, with a pointed, condescending look at Imani, "don't seem to understand how airline procedures work. We have protocols for a reason. It's for everyone's safety and comfort." The invocation of safety was a masterstroke of passive aggression. It subtly framed Imani's insistence as a potential threat. "I understand procedure perfectly well," Imani stated, her patience wearing dangerously thin. The analyst in her was screaming that this was an inefficient, illogical, and bias-driven waste of time. The woman in her was just plain angry. "The procedure is, I show you a valid boarding pass and you allow me to proceed to my seat. You're the one deviating from that procedure." Karen's facade of professional courtesy finally cracked. Her voice dropped, becoming a low, venomous hiss. "Listen to me. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, or how you got that boarding pass, but you are not sitting in my business class cabin looking like that. It's not going to happen. We have standards. Our premium customers pay a great deal of money for a certain level of service and exclusivity." There it was, the ugly truth laid bare. Looking like that. Exclusivity. It was never about a seating error. It was about her face, her clothes, her youth, her race. She was an unwelcome variable in Karen's carefully curated equation of luxury. "My appearance is not in violation of any airline policy," Imani said, her voice dangerously calm. "But your behavior is. You are discriminating against a paying passenger. And I'm going to ask you one last time. Return my boarding pass and step aside." "Is that a threat?" Karen scoffed, actually laughing a little. She felt emboldened now, convinced she was in the right. This was no different from ejecting a drunk and disorderly passenger. She was protecting her cabin. "Are you threatening a member of the cabin crew? Because if you are, that has very serious consequences." A junior flight attendant, a young man named Ben, hovered nervously nearby. "Karen, maybe I can just check the manifest on the tablet," he offered, his expression pleading. "Stay out of this, Ben," Karen snapped, not even looking at him. "I'm handling it." She turned her full attention back to Imani, her eyes blazing with self-righteous fury. "I have had enough of this. You are creating a disturbance. You are refusing to follow crew instructions. You leave me no choice." She leaned back and spoke to Ben in a loud, clear voice, ensuring everyone could hear. "Get the captain, now." The words hung in the air, a declaration of war. Calling the captain was the nuclear option. It meant the situation had escalated beyond the point of no return. Passengers gasped. The man in the Brioni suit grumbled, "For God's sake," and pulled out his phone to start recording. Imani felt a strange sense of calm descend upon her. The initial sting of humiliation had morphed into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. This flight attendant had no idea who she was dealing with, no concept of the power Imani wielded. Karen thought she was calling for her ultimate authority figure. In reality, she was summoning a subordinate. "Good," Imani said, her voice a quiet promise that went unheard by everyone except the seething flight attendant before her. "Let's talk to the captain. It's time he understood who's really flying this plane." The few minutes it took for the captain to emerge from the cockpit felt like an eternity. The aisle was now clogged with a backlog of frustrated business-class passengers, their grumbling a low, unhappy chorus. The man with the phone was still recording, a smug look on his face, as if he were a citizen journalist capturing a breaking story. Imani ignored him. She ignored all of them. Her focus was laser-sharp, her mind already several moves ahead. She stood perfectly still, a small island of tranquility in a sea of rising tension. Finally, a man with silver-flecked temples and an air of weary authority appeared. His uniform was crisp, the 4 stripes on his epaulets announcing his rank, Captain Miller. He was a veteran pilot, a man who had seen everything from engine failures over the Atlantic to medical emergencies at 35,000 feet. A seating dispute was, in his world, a triviality, an annoying diversion from his pre-flight checklists. "What's the problem here, Karen?" he asked, his voice a low baritone accustomed to being obeyed. His eyes flicked from his senior flight attendant to Imani, then to the bottleneck of passengers, and a frown creased his brow. Karen immediately launched into her performance. Her voice, which had been so venomous moments before, was now filled with a tone of beleaguered professionalism. "Captain, thank you for coming. I have a situation here. This person," she said, gesturing to Imani as if she were an unidentifiable object, "is insisting she has a seat in business class. Her boarding pass seems to indicate that, but it's clearly some kind of error. She doesn't have a reservation in the system under her name for this cabin. She's dressed inappropriately, and when I tried to explain the situation and sort it out for her, she became belligerent and refused to follow my instructions. She's holding up the entire boarding process." She presented her case as a tidy package of protocol violations and passenger non-compliance. She had skillfully omitted her own provocative language and discriminatory assumptions. Captain Miller's gaze settled on Imani. It was a practiced, assessing look. He saw a young woman in a hoodie, seemingly out of place. He saw a standoff. His instinct, honed by years of managing crew and passengers, was to de-escalate and restore order as quickly as possible. That usually meant backing his crew. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Imani directly, "I'm Captain Miller. I understand there's some confusion about your seat. My flight attendant is just trying to do her job. We need to keep things moving. Now, if you'll just step over here with me, we can look at the manifest and find your correct seat assignment." He was firm but polite. He was attempting to be the voice of reason. But to Imani, it was just a more polished version of the same dismissal. He had already accepted Karen's framing of the event. "There is no confusion, Captain," Imani replied, her tone respectful but unyielding. "There is only a refusal to accept a valid ticket. Your flight attendant," she said, her eyes briefly meeting Karen's triumphant smirk, "took my boarding pass and has it in her pocket. It says seat 3A, Dr. Imani Hayes. I would like it back, and I would like to go to my seat." Captain Miller's frown deepened slightly. The mention of doctor seemed to momentarily register. He turned to Karen. "Let me see the pass." Karen's smirk vanished. She had hoped the captain would simply remove Imani without needing to see the evidence that contradicted her story. Reluctantly, she retrieved the boarding pass from her pocket and handed it to him. He examined it. He saw the name, the seat number. It looked perfectly legitimate. He pulled a tablet from a holster on the side of the cockpit door frame and tapped on the screen, bringing up the flight manifest. He scrolled, then stopped. He looked at the tablet, then at the boarding pass, then at Karen. "Karen, she's on the manifest. Seat 3A, Dr. Imani Hayes." His voice was flat, a statement of fact, but a hint of annoyance had crept in. This was wasting time. A flicker of panic crossed Karen's face, but she recovered quickly. "But Captain, I checked earlier. She wasn't there. The system must have just updated it. It must have been a very, very last-minute booking." She was scrambling, trying to find a logical reason for her profound error in judgment. And look at her, it just didn't seem right. That was the fatal admission. It didn't seem right. The captain's eyes narrowed. This was no longer a procedural issue. It was a judgment call, and a poor one at that. "Our job isn't to decide if a passenger seems right, Karen. It's to check the manifest. That's the procedure." He handed the boarding pass back to Imani. "My apologies for the delay, Doctor," he said, the honorific now spoken with a measure of respect. "You can proceed to your seat." He turned to address the waiting passengers. "Folks, we'll be underway shortly. Sorry for the holdup." It should have been over. Imani had been vindicated. But as she took her boarding pass, the condescension, the public humiliation, the sheer unadulterated prejudice she had been subjected to, coalesced into a single point of cold fury. This wasn't just about her. It was about every person who had ever been made to feel small, to feel like they didn't belong. This was a teachable moment, and class was now in session. She didn't move. "Thank you, Captain," she said, her voice clear and carrying through the now quiet cabin. "But we're not quite done." Captain Miller turned back, his expression hardening again. "Ma'am, I've resolved the issue." "You've resolved a seating assignment," Imani corrected him gently. "You haven't resolved the conduct of your crew. Your senior flight attendant didn't just make a mistake. She made a judgment based on my appearance. She accused me of being a liar. She confiscated my property. She publicly humiliated me. And she did it all under the banner of Apex Air Standards." Karen went pale. This was not how it was supposed to go. The passenger was supposed to scurry away, either embarrassed or grateful. "I believe exclusivity was the word she used," Imani continued, her eyes locking onto Karen's. "I find that interesting, because I've just invested over $600 million into this airline. So you see, when your flight attendant talks about the premium customers and who pays for this cabin, she's talking about me." A collective gasp went through the cabin. The man who had been filming lowered his phone, his mouth slightly agape. Mr. Henderson's kindly face was a mask of astonishment. Captain Miller stared at Imani, his mind struggling to process what he had just heard. It sounded preposterous. An investor? Of that magnitude, dressed in a hoodie and jeans? Karen let out a short, sharp, disbelieving laugh. "You? An investor? Don't be ridiculous. You're what, 25? You probably got a lucky payout on some cryptocurrency and think you own the world." Imani simply smiled, a slow, chilling smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was the same smile she gave an opponent in a negotiation just before she dismantled their entire position. "Captain Miller," she said, her attention shifting back to the pilot, whose face was now a study in confusion and dawning horror. "My firm is Nexus Capital. You may not have heard of it, but I can assure you, your CEO, Mr. Davies, has. He and I have a board meeting scheduled for 10 a.m. tomorrow in your London headquarters to discuss the future of this airline, a future that I now own. So, I would recommend you get your house in order. Because this house," she said, gesturing to the plane around them, "is mine." The silence that fell over the business class cabin was absolute. It was a dense, heavy silence, thick with shock and the frantic whirring of minds trying to recalibrate reality. Imani's words hung in the air, echoing with an authority that was impossible to fake. "This house is mine." Captain Miller felt a cold dread wash over him, a feeling he hadn't experienced since a near miss over the North Sea a decade ago. He was a company man, a pilot who followed the chain of command. The name Nexus Capital meant nothing to him, but the mention of CEO Alan Davies, spoken with such casual familiarity, was a lightning bolt. No ordinary passenger talked about having a board meeting with the CEO. His mind raced, connecting disparate pieces of information he had previously ignored. The endless company memos over the past few months about the restructuring. The whispers of a massive, game-changing investment from a mysterious source that had saved them all from layoffs. The recent frantic push from corporate to improve customer service metrics at all costs. He had dismissed it as corporate jargon. Now he feared he was standing at the epicenter of its real-world application. He looked at Imani again, but this time he truly saw her. The simple hoodie wasn't cheap. It was a soft, perfectly tailored Loro Piana piece that probably cost more than his entire uniform. The worn satchel was a vintage Gurkha, a quiet symbol of old money and impeccable taste. The confidence wasn't youthful arrogance. It was the deep, unshakable poise of someone who operates in a world of immense power. He and Karen hadn't seen a young woman in jeans. They had seen what they wanted to see, a projection of their own biases. And that error was about to cost them dearly. Karen, however, was still trapped in her own reality, her mind refusing to accept the paradigm shift. Denial was her last line of defense. "She's lying, Captain," she insisted, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. "This is insane. She's some kind of con artist trying to get a free upgrade or sue the airline. We have to call security. We have to have her removed. Be quiet, Karen, Captain Miller snapped, his voice a low, urgent command. He didn't know for certain if Imani was telling the truth, but the risk of her being right was catastrophic. Every instinct he had was screaming that he was standing on a landmine. Imani watched the captain's internal struggle, her expression unreadable. She reached into her satchel and pulled out her phone. Her movements were calm and deliberate. She unlocked it, her thumb hovering over a contact simply labeled AD. She didn't press it. Not yet. She just held the phone, letting the captain see the initials. "Captain," she said softly, "your flight attendant is creating a further disturbance. She has accused me of being a criminal. My legal team at Skadden Arps would have a field day with that. But I'm not interested in litigation. I'm interested in results. The result I want right now is to sit in seat 3A and enjoy the service I've paid for. However, your employee's behavior has raised serious questions about the training, professionalism, and culture of this airline. And as the person whose capital is currently guaranteeing your salary, that concerns me deeply." Every word was a perfectly placed blow. She mentioned her law firm, one of the most powerful in the world, with the same ease she had mentioned the CEO. The junior flight attendant, Ben, who had been frozen in the galley, now looked physically ill. He edged forward, holding the company-issued tablet. Captain? Sir?" he stammered. "A priority message just came through from corporate operations." "What is it?" Miller demanded, his attention snapping to the young man. Ben swallowed hard, his eyes wide with terror as he read from the screen. It's a fleet-wide alert, a passenger manifest update. It says, please be advised, Dr. Imani Hayes, seat 3A on flight 001 is to be considered a VVIP. She is the principal of Nexus Capital, our new majority stakeholder. Extend every courtesy. All crew are to be made aware. Acknowledge receipt immediately." The tablet screen, glowing with the damning text, was the final nail in the coffin of Karen's reality. The blood drained from her face, leaving her with a pasty, waxen complexion. Her carefully constructed world of rules and hierarchies crumbled into dust. The young woman she had derided, blocked, and humiliated wasn't just a passenger. She was the owner, the boss, the queen on the chessboard. And Karen had just tried to sweep her off the board like a misplaced pawn. Her body began to tremble, a violent, uncontrollable shudder. Her breath came in ragged gasps. No, it can't be. It's a mistake. A trick," she whispered, her eyes darting around wildly, looking for an escape that didn't exist. Captain Miller took the tablet from Ben's shaking hands and read the message for himself. The corporate jargon was unmistakable. VVIP. Principal. Majority stakeholder. It was real. A wave of nausea rolled through him. He had nearly allowed his flight attendant to eject the single most important person to ever set foot on one of his planes. He looked at Imani, and for the first time, he felt a profound sense of fear. Her calm was more terrifying than any outburst could have been. It was the calm of absolute power, of someone who didn't need to raise her voice to be heard across continents. Imani finally lowered her phone, the call to the CEO no longer necessary. The system, her system, had worked. Checks and balances. She had built them into her companies for a reason. "So," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a scalpel, "now that we have established who I am, let's return to the issue of your employee's conduct." She turned her head slowly, her dark, intelligent eyes finally settling on the unraveling flight attendant. "Karen, isn't it?" Karen flinched as if she had been struck. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. All the arrogance, all the self-righteousness had evaporated, leaving behind a hollow shell of pure, unadulterated terror. She was looking at the woman who held her entire life, her career, her pension, in the palm of her hand. And she had just spat in that hand. The atmosphere in the cabin had transformed. The air, once thick with tension, was now charged with the electric hum of consequence. The passengers, who had been irritated by the delay, were now silent, rapt witnesses to a corporate drama unfolding at 30,000 feet. The man who had been filming was still recording, but his smug expression had been replaced by one of awe. He knew he was capturing something extraordinary. Imani took a single step forward, and Karen flinched back, instinctively creating space. The power dynamic had not just shifted, it had inverted with the force of a tectonic plate. "Karen," Imani said again, her voice devoid of malice, but heavy with the weight of judgment. "You told me you have standards on this airline. You told me you protect the exclusivity of this cabin for your premium customers. Let's talk about that. Apex Air was 3 weeks from liquidation when my firm intervened. Its stock was worthless. Its credit was shot. This plane, this seat, your salary, it was all about to vanish. The premium customers you were so eager to protect were fleeing to other airlines." She let that sink in, her gaze sweeping over the other passengers who now refused to meet her eye. They were complicit in their silence, and they knew it. "My standard," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "is excellence. My standard is performance. My standard is a culture where every single person, from the boardroom to the baggage handlers, is treated with respect. Not because of the clothes they wear, the color of their skin, or the price of their ticket, but because they are human beings. You, Karen, have just shown me that my investment is at risk, not because of fuel costs or market competition, but because of a rot from within, a rot of prejudice and petty tyranny that you seem to personify." Each word was a hammer blow to Karen's crumbling psyche. Tears began to well in her eyes, not of remorse, but of sheer self-pitying terror. "Please," she stammered, the word barely a whisper. I made a mistake. I'm sorry. I was trying to follow the rules." "No," Imani countered instantly, her voice sharp and precise. "You were not following rules. You were enforcing your own biases. The rules are on the manifest the captain showed you. You ignored the rules. You saw a young black woman, and you assumed she was poor, out of place, and unworthy. You didn't see a customer. You didn't see a passenger. You saw a problem to be removed. That is not a mistake. That is a choice, and choices have consequences." Imani turned her attention to the captain. "Captain Miller, I am officially lodging a formal complaint against this employee for discriminatory harassment. I expect a full investigation, but my immediate concern is for the safety and comfort of this flight. Her presence here is now a disruption. She is emotionally compromised and professionally disgraced. She is in no condition to perform her duties. I want her off my plane." The finality of the statement was chilling. Off my plane. Captain Miller, who had been standing rigid with a mixture of fear and shame, nodded curtly. There was no other option. He was now taking orders, and he knew it. "I understand. I'll arrange it." He turned to the terrified junior attendant. "Ben, escort Karen to the crew rest area. Stay with her. She is off duty effective immediately." The reality of the situation finally crashed down on Karen with the force of a physical blow. "No!" she cried out, her voice cracking with hysteria. "You can't do this. I have a mortgage. I have kids. It was a mistake. Please, I'll do anything." She lunged forward, her hands outstretched in a desperate, pleading gesture towards Imani. Imani didn't even flinch. She simply held up a hand, and the captain instinctively moved to intercept his hysterical employee. "Karen, that's enough," he commanded, his voice shaking with the effort of maintaining control. "You're making it worse." Karen collapsed against him, her body racked with sobs. 15 years. I gave this company 15 years of my life," she wailed, a pathetic, broken sound. Her breakdown was total and complete, a spectacle of self-destruction. Imani watched for a moment, not with satisfaction, but with a kind of detached sadness. This was the messy human element she so often tried to avoid. The ugly, predictable outcome of unchecked prejudice. It was a cancer, and it had to be excised. As Ben gently but firmly led the weeping, incoherent Karen toward the back of the plane and out of sight, a new problem emerged. The business class cabin was now short-staffed, with its most senior member removed. A poised, dark-haired flight attendant named Maria, who had been watching the entire scene unfold from the galley with a quiet professionalism, stepped forward. "Dr. Hayes," she said, her voice calm and respectful. "My name is Maria. I will be taking over as the lead attendant for this cabin. On behalf of the entire crew, I want to offer our most sincere and profound apologies for what you have just experienced. It was unacceptable, and it does not represent who we strive to be." Imani looked at Maria, assessing her. She saw genuine remorse and a steely competence in her eyes. This was the standard she expected. "Thank you, Maria," Imani said, her tone softening for the first time. "I appreciate that." She then turned to the other passengers who were still frozen in their seats. "To everyone else," she announced, her voice projecting through the cabin, "I apologize for the delay you've all experienced. It was not my intention to create a scene." She paused, letting her gaze drift over each one of them. "But let this be a lesson. In my companies, we judge people on their merit, not their appearance. I suggest you all do the same. You never know who you're sitting next to." With that, she finally turned and walked the few steps to her seat, 3A. It was a plush, spacious pod by the window. She slid into the seat, the supple leather sighing under her. She stowed her satchel, pulled out a copy of the Financial Times, and opened it. To anyone watching, she looked like any other business-class passenger settling in for a long flight. But everyone in that cabin knew they had just witnessed a coup. The old guard had fallen, and a new power was firmly and quietly in her seat. The flight could now proceed, but everything had changed. The plane and the company were now flying in a new direction. The rest of the boarding process was completed in a state of hyper-efficient, nervous silence. The remaining cabin crew moved with a newfound urgency and deference. Every request was met with an immediate, "Of course, Dr. Hayes." Every glass was filled with reverential care. The atmosphere wasn't just respectful, it was fearful. Imani knew this wasn't ideal. Fear was a poor long-term motivator. But it was a start. The shock to the system was necessary. As the plane finally pushed back from the gate, Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom. It was the standard pre-flight announcement, but there was a tremor of humility in his tone that had not been there before. When he got to the part about the flight crew, he hesitated for a fraction of a second. "Our cabin is being led today by Maria. They are the finest crew in the sky, and they are here to ensure you have a safe and pleasant journey." There was no mention of the change. There didn't need to be. The flight to London was smooth. The clouds below were a brilliant, unbroken sea of white. Imani barely touched the gourmet meal that was served to her. Instead, she worked, her laptop open, her phone buzzing with encrypted messages from her team. She was finalizing the agenda for the next day's board meeting. The incident with Karen had not been a distraction. It had become the new item #1 on that agenda. It was no longer just about financial restructuring. It was now about a complete corporate cultural overhaul. She drafted a memo to Alan Davies, the CEO. It was concise and direct. Subject: the Apex Standard. "Alan, an incident on my flight today has made it clear that our most significant liability isn't on the balance sheet. It's in our culture. We have a systemic issue with prejudice, customer profiling, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what premium services means. This is not just an HR problem. It is a brand-destroying, revenue-killing cancer. Tomorrow's meeting will now focus on a new initiative I am personally spearheading, the Apex Standard. It will involve a top-to-bottom review of all hiring and training protocols, the implementation of a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind, and the creation of a new, independent passenger advocacy board to review all complaints. Performance bonuses, from the executive level down, will be tied to metrics of inclusion and customer satisfaction, not just on-time departures. We are no longer in the business of selling seats. We are in the business of selling respect. That starts now. See you tomorrow, Imani." She hit send without a moment's hesitation. Halfway across the Atlantic, Maria approached her seat. "Dr. Hayes," she said softly. "Excuse me, Captain Miller would like to know if you would be willing to speak with him for a moment." "Of course," Imani said, closing her laptop. A few moments later, the captain appeared, his hat respectfully tucked under his arm. He looked older than he had a few hours ago. "Dr. Hayes," he began, his voice low. "I know we're in the air, but I couldn't wait until we landed. I need to apologize to you personally, not as a captain to a passenger, but as one person to another. What happened today was a failure of my leadership. I listened to my crew members' biased assessment before I looked at the facts. I was part of the problem. There's no excuse for it, and I am truly, deeply sorry." Imani studied his face. She saw genuine contrition there, the painful self-awareness of a good man who had failed to live up to his own standards. "Thank you, Captain," she said, her voice softening. "I appreciate you saying that. An apology is the first step. What you do tomorrow is what matters more." "What about Karen?" he asked, the question clearly weighing on him. "What will happen to her?" Imani leaned back in her seat. "Her career with Apex Air is over," she stated, not unkindly but with absolute finality. "This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. We cannot have people representing our brand who harbor those kinds of prejudices. She can't be retrained out of a flawed character. Allowing her to stay would send a message that what she did was forgivable with a slap on the wrist. It's not. She will receive her severance package as per her contract, and that's it. We will part ways." She paused, then added, "But the real consequence for her isn't losing her job. It's that for the rest of her life, every time she sees a person who doesn't fit her narrow worldview, she will hesitate. She will have a flicker of doubt. She will remember today, and she will wonder if she's about to make the same mistake again. That seed of doubt, that's her karma. My hope is that it grows into something better." The captain nodded slowly, accepting the verdict. It was harsh, but it was just. When the plane landed at Heathrow, a black car was waiting on the tarmac directly at the base of the jet bridge stairs, a privilege reserved for visiting heads of state. Alan Davies, a man in his late 50s with a harried but sharp expression, was standing beside it. He opened the car door for Imani himself. "Imani," he said, his face a mask of mortification and apology. "I got your memo. I am so sorry. I am launching a full-scale investigation. I am—" Imani cut him off gently. "We'll discuss it tomorrow, Alan. We have a lot of work to do." As she slid into the car, she glanced back at the massive Boeing 777. The passengers from business class were just beginning to deplane, walking past her car. She saw the man who had filmed her. He met her gaze and gave a small, respectful nod. She saw Mr. Henderson, the well-meaning man, who looked at her with an expression of pure astonishment. They had all been part of the story. They were all witnesses. The door closed, shutting out the noise of the airport. As the car pulled away, Imani felt a sense of profound clarity. She had never wanted to be the face of her company. She loved the anonymity of the numbers, the quiet power behind the scenes. But today had taught her a valuable lesson. Sometimes, to protect your investment, to build something truly worthy, you had to step out of the shadows. You had to be seen. You had to take your seat and remind everyone who was really in charge. And from now on, everyone at Apex Air and in the wider world would know exactly who Dr. Imani Hayes was. The Apex Air Board meeting the next morning was unlike any in its 50-year history. The room, paneled in dark, imposing mahogany, was a temple to the old way of doing things. The board members, mostly silver-haired men in bespoke suits, sat with expressions of grim apprehension. They had all read the memo. They had all heard the whispers from the crew of Flight 001. When Imani Hayes walked in, dressed in a sharp, impeccably tailored navy blue power suit, the room fell silent. She took her place at the head of the table, not with arrogance, but with the quiet authority of someone who owned the room before she even entered it. Alan Davies sat to her right, his face set with a new resolve. Imani didn't recount the incident in detail. They already knew. Instead, she laid out her vision for the Apex standard, with the clinical precision of a surgeon and the passionate conviction of a revolutionary. She spoke of data-driven empathy, of turning customer respect into a quantifiable asset. She projected charts showing the long-term revenue loss correlated with negative social media mentions of customer service. She dismantled their old worldview that luxury was about exclusivity and rebuilt it on a foundation of universal dignity. "The brand is our most valuable asset," she concluded, her eyes scanning each face at the table. "And our brand is not the leather in the seats or the champagne in the glasses. It's the interaction between our people and our customers. Yesterday I saw that interaction fail in the most spectacular way. Today we begin to fix it. This is not a suggestion. It is our new trajectory." There was some resistance, cloaked in concerns about cost and implementation time. But Imani had an answer for every objection, a data point for every doubt. By the end of the hour, she had not just their compliance, she had their belief. For the first time, the board saw not just an investor, but a leader. The changes were swift and seismic. Within a week, a company-wide town hall was broadcast to every employee, from pilots in Hong Kong to gate agents in Chicago. In it, Imani, standing beside Alan Davies, personally announced the Apex Standard. She didn't mention Karen by name, but she told the story of a passenger who was judged by her clothes and not her character, and she made it clear that such behavior had no future at the airline. The new Independent Passenger Advocacy Board was established, staffed by a mix of retired pilots, customer service experts, and former frequent flyers. Maria, the flight attendant from Flight 001, was offered a key role in developing the new hands-on empathy training, a position she accepted with humbled pride. Ben, the junior attendant, became one of its first and most vocal champions, his confidence blossoming now that he was empowered to do the right thing. The man who had filmed the incident posted the video online. It went viral. But instead of becoming a PR nightmare for Apex Air, the company got ahead of it. They released a statement, penned by Imani herself, confirming the events and detailing the immediate sweeping changes being implemented. The public response was overwhelmingly positive. Apex Air wasn't just a company that had made a mistake. It was a company that was holding itself accountable in a real, transparent way. Bookings, particularly in the coveted younger demographics, began to climb. Months later, in a quiet suburban home, Karen scrolled through the news on her tablet. Her severance package had been generous, but finding a new job at her age, with her specialized skill set, was proving difficult. An article popped up, Apex Air Soars, How a Focus on Radical Respect Revolutionized an Ailing Airline. It featured a picture of a smiling Imani Hayes shaking hands with a beaming Maria. Karen felt a familiar, bitter pang. For weeks she had told herself she was the victim, a casualty of a world gone too politically correct. But as she read about the new training programs, the glowing customer testimonials, the rising stock price, another feeling began to creep in, the cold, heavy weight of accountability. She remembered Imani's final words to the captain. That seed of doubt, that's her karma. The seed was there. When she was short with a cashier at the grocery store, she hesitated. When she saw a group of teenagers laughing loudly at the mall, her first instinct to judge was replaced by a flicker of memory. She was still bitter, still angry, but she was no longer certain. The world was more complicated than she had believed. That, in its own quiet way, was the start of a new trajectory for her too. 1 year after that fateful flight, Imani Hayes sat in seat 3A on another Apex Air flight, this time to Tokyo. She was flying incognito, as she often did now, to audit the customer experience firsthand. The flight attendant who approached her was young, bright-eyed, and wearing a small pin on his lapel, a stylized A for Apex, intertwined with an infinity symbol. It was the pin given to employees who received top marks in the new Apex Standard training. "Welcome aboard, ma'am," he said with a genuine warm smile. "Is there anything I can get for you to make your flight more comfortable before we take off?" He met her eyes directly, his demeanor open and welcoming. He didn't see a hoodie or jeans, he saw a person. Imani smiled back, a real unguarded smile. "No, thank you." she said. "Everything is already perfect." As the plane ascended into the deep blue of the stratosphere, she looked out the window. She had changed a company. She had altered the course of thousands of lives, from the board members down to this new flight attendant. She had never sought the spotlight, but by being forced into it, she had learned that true power wasn't just about owning a company. It was about shaping its soul. And the soul of Apex Air was finally, truly, ready to fly. That was the story of how one woman's quiet power completely reshaped a billion-dollar airline. It's a powerful reminder that true authority doesn't come from a uniform or a title, but from integrity, intelligence, and the courage to stand your ground. Karen's prejudice cost her everything, while Imani Hayes turned a moment of profound disrespect into a catalyst for revolutionary change. What did you think of the hard karma Karen received? Was it deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories where the underdog comes out on top and karma is served cold, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable dramatic tales. We have new stories coming every week that you won't want to miss.